Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My job at the manufacturing plant requires night shifts, which means I sleep during the day. She's been battling cancer for 2 years now, and even with insurance, the costs keep piling up. My apartment is nothing fancy, just a small studio in an older building. The walls are thin and there are cracks everywhere, but the rent is cheap and the landlord doesn't ask too many questions. I've been living here for 3 years, and it's been mostly quiet during the day when I need to sleep. Everything changed about a month ago when this cricket moved into the wall right next to my bed. At first, I thought it was kinda nice, a little natural sound to help me drift off. But this wasn't your typical peaceful cricket. This thing was loud, aggressive, and had absolutely no rhythm. While normal crickets chirp in a steady pattern, this one went completely random. Just constant jarring noise that made it impossible to relax. I tried everything at first. Earplugs didn't work because the sound seemed to vibrate through the wall itself. I moved my mattress to the other side of the room, but the cricket was so loud I could still hear it clearly. I even tried playing white noise, but nothing could mask that piercing shriek. After 2 weeks of getting maybe 3 hours of broken sleep per day, I was losing it. I was making mistakes at work, falling asleep on my feet, and my supervisor had already given me a warning. I couldn't afford to lose this job, not with mom's treatment costs. I spent hours trying to find the cricket. I could tell it was somewhere in a crack behind the electrical outlet, but the gap was too narrow and deep for me to reach. I tried spraying water into the crack, tapping on the wall, even playing loud music to try to scare it out. Nothing worked. One afternoon, after another sleepless day, I was sitting on my bed feeling completely defeated when my neighbor Karen knocked on my door. She is this middle-aged woman who thinks she runs the entire building, always complaining about something, always telling everyone what they should be doing. She immediately started yelling at me about noise coming from my apartment. She said there had been weird banging and music coming from my place during the day. She complained that some people work normal hours and are trying to relax when they get home. I explained that I've been trying to get rid of a cricket that was keeping me awake. I told her I work nights, so I need to sleep during the day. She scoffed and said a cricket excuse was ridiculous. She accused me of just making excuses for being inconsiderate. She bragged about living in the building for 8 years and never having bug problems. Then she had the nerve to suggest I probably brought the cricket in because my apartment was dirty. I apologized for the noise and tried to explain that I needed to sleep. I told her the cricket was literally making me sick from lack of sleep. She coldly replied that it wasn't her problem. She said I chose to work weird hours and the rest of the building shouldn't have to suffer because I couldn't adapt to a normal schedule. She threatened to file a complaint with the landlord if the noise continued. She walked off, leaving me even more frustrated. Here I was, barely functioning from sleep deprivation, and she was more concerned about a little daytime noise than the fact that I was struggling. That night at work, I was so exhausted I nearly got my hand caught in one of the machines. My coworker noticed and pulled me aside. He told me I looked terrible and asked what was going on. I explained the whole situation, and he just shook his head. He said he had a similar problem once with mice in his walls. He explained that most animals get scared when they hear sudden, loud noises because they think it's a predator. That's when it hit me. I had noticed that whenever there was a sudden sound, like a car backfiring or someone slamming a door, the cricket would go quiet for a few minutes. It was scanning for danger before starting up again. I went home that morning with a plan. I dug out an old phone I had in my drawer and found a video online of a metal pipe falling. It was perfect. Loud enough to startle the cricket, but not loud enough to bother me when I was trying to sleep. I placed the phone right next to the crack in the wall and set the video to play on repeat. The sound came every 15 seconds or so, just random enough to keep the cricket on edge. It worked immediately. The cricket went completely silent. I could practically feel it cowering in that crack, too scared to make a sound. For the first time in weeks, I fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. I woke up 8 hours later feeling like a new person. No interruptions, no jarring cricket screams, just blessed silence. The cricket was still there. I could see it occasionally if I looked closely at the crack, but it was too terrified to chirp. 3 days later, Karen showed up at my door again. This time she looked furious. She demanded to know what the constant noise coming from my apartment was now. She said it sounded like construction or something. I told her it was just a little sound to help me sleep. I mentioned that it was much quieter than what I was doing before. She declared it completely unacceptable and threatened to call the landlord right away. I told her to go ahead. I explained that I had checked the lease agreement and there was nothing about daytime noise restrictions since this building wasn't designated as having quiet hours during the day. She accused me of harassment and said I was doing this on purpose to annoy everyone. I corrected her, explaining that I was actually doing this so I could sleep without being woken up by a cricket. I reminded her about the cricket she had said was my fault for having a dirty apartment. She insisted that was completely different. I asked her how exactly it was different. I pointed out that she had told me to adapt to a normal schedule, and this was me adapting. I had found a solution that worked for me. She walked off angrily. I later found out from another neighbor that she had indeed called the landlord, who told her that unless the noise was excessive or happening during actual quiet hours, there wasn't much he could do. It's been 2 weeks now, and I'm still sleeping perfectly. The cricket is alive but completely silent, too scared to attract any mates or come out of its hiding spot. I adjusted the volume so it's just barely audible to me, but apparently loud enough to keep that little noisemaker in check. Karen still looks at me angrily in the hallway, but she's stopped complaining. I think she finally realized that her plan to force me to suffer in silence backfired. Now she gets to listen to the metal pipe sound instead of getting to enjoy her superiority complex. I'm well rested. My work performance is back to normal, and I'm back on track with saving for mom's medical bills. This happened when I was 7 years old, right in the middle of second grade. My family had just moved to a new town because my dad got promoted at work. The timing was terrible, switching schools halfway through the year when all the kids already had their friend groups and knew the routines. My parents were worried about me adjusting, especially because I was already a pretty shy kid. They spent weeks preparing me for the transition, talking to the principal, and making sure all my records were transferred properly. My mom even made a special folder with all my information, including the story behind my name in case the new teacher had questions. My name is actually Frederick, named after my maternal grandmother Frida, who passed away just days after I was born. My parents wanted to honor her memory, but didn't want to call me Fred, so they started calling me Rick when I was little. By the time I started school, everyone knew me as Rick. My old teachers, my friends, even the school records had it noted. The move meant leaving behind my favorite teacher, my best friend, and starting over completely. I remember being nervous that first morning, clutching my backpack straps when my mom walked me to the classroom door. Our regular teacher had left suddenly due to a family emergency, and they'd brought in this replacement teacher who seemed determined to run things her way. She was probably in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and glasses that she wore on a chain around her neck. She had this stern expression that made me want to shrink into my seat. On her first day, she decided to go around the room and have each student introduce themselves. I watched the other kids stand up one by one, saying their names clearly. When it was my turn, I stood up nervously and told her my name was Rick. The teacher immediately shouted that we don't use nicknames in her class and declared that my name was Richard. I felt my face turn red when all the other kids stared at me. I tried to explain that everyone calls me Rick and that even my old teachers knew me by that name. She cut me off and said she didn't care what my old teachers did. In her classroom, we used proper names only, and I would answer to Richard from now on. I was confused because Richard wasn't even right either, but I was too scared to correct her again. The whole class was looking at me, and I just wanted to disappear. I gathered my courage and tried to tell her that actually, my real name was Frederick, not Richard. But she told me not to argue with her and insisted that my name was Richard, and that was final with no exceptions. I stood there for a moment, completely bewildered. How could she be so sure about my own name? But she was the teacher, and I've been taught to respect teachers, so I just nodded and sat down. For the next few weeks, I answered to Richard even though it felt completely wrong. The other kids started calling me Richard too, which made me feel even more disconnected from my new school. I felt like I was losing myself. When I'd raise my hand, she'd call on Richard. When she took attendance, she'd mark Richard present. I started to dread hearing that name. At home, I didn't tell my parents what was happening. I thought maybe this was just how things worked at the new school. Maybe the teacher knew something I didn't. I was 7. What did I know about school rules? But then parent-teacher association night came around. My parents were excited to meet my new teacher and see how I was adjusting. My mom had prepared a list of questions about my progress, and my dad was looking forward to discussing my transition to the new school. They walked into the classroom that evening and I stayed home with my older sister. Later, they told me exactly what happened. The teacher greeted them warmly and said she was pleased to meet Richard's parents. My mom looked around the classroom, confused, and asked who she was talking about. The teacher repeated that she meant Richard, their son Richard. My dad stepped forward with a puzzled expression and said he thought there had been a mistake. He told her that their son's name was Frederick, though he goes by Rick. The teacher insisted that wasn't right and explained that she doesn't allow nicknames in her classroom, so his name was Richard, and that's what she called him. My mom's expression changed completely. She got that look that meant someone was about to get an earful. She told the teacher that his name was Frederick, named after his deceased grandmother, and that he'd gone by Rick his entire life. Then she asked if the teacher had even bothered to look at his enrollment paperwork. The teacher started to say that she had assumed something, but my dad interrupted her. He asked how she could assume and pointed out that she'd been calling their child by the wrong name for weeks without checking his actual records. My dad worked in the teachers' union, so he knew exactly how schools were supposed to handle student information. He also knew that what she was doing was completely inappropriate. He told her this was unacceptable and that she had his file right there in her desk with his legal name, preferred name, and the reason behind it all documented. The teacher tried to defend herself by saying she maintained order in her classroom by using proper names only. But my mom shot back that proper names meant using the correct name, and she'd been using a completely incorrect name. She asked if the teacher realized how confusing and upsetting this must be for a 7-year-old who was already adjusting to a new school. My parents told me that the teacher's face went pale when she finally pulled out my file and saw that she'd been wrong the entire time. Not only was she calling me by the wrong name, but she'd been so stubborn about it that she never bothered to verify what she was saying. My dad said he'd be speaking to the principal first thing tomorrow morning, and that this kind of carelessness was exactly what gave teachers a bad reputation. My mom added that she'd be requesting a meeting with the district supervisor because a teacher who can't be bothered to learn her students' actual names had no business being in a classroom. The next day I walked into school nervous about what would happen, but when I sat down the teacher called me over to her desk. She told me she owed me an apology and that she'd made a mistake about my name. She said she should have listened to me from the beginning. I asked if I could be Rick again, and she said yes, of course. She apologized for making me uncomfortable these past weeks. Word spread quickly through the school about what had happened. The principal called my parents to apologize, and the teacher was given a formal reprimand for not following proper procedures with student records. My mom later told me that what bothered her most wasn't just a name mix-up, but the fact that the teacher had been so arrogant about it. She'd refused to listen to a child trying to tell her his own name, and she'd been too lazy to check the paperwork that would have cleared everything up immediately. From that day on, I was Rick again in class. The other kids quickly switched back to using my real name, and I finally started to feel like myself at the new school. The teacher never made another assumption about a student's name without checking her records first. 3 years ago, I started as a part-time sales associate at the local electronics store while I was still in college. After I graduated with my business degree, my manager promoted me to assistant manager. The pay isn't amazing, but it's steady work, and I actually enjoy helping customers find what they need. My manager is this really cool guy in his 40s, He's fair, treats everyone with respect, and always has our backs when customers get out of line. He's also built like a brick house and used to be in the military before he got into retail management. The guy commands respect just by walking into a room. About 2 months ago, we had an opening for another sales associate position. We posted the job online and got a bunch of applications. One of them was from this 20-something girl who seemed okay on paper, but when she came in for the interview, something felt off. She was late, didn't seem to know much about electronics, and kept mentioning how her mom told her this would be an easy job. My manager and I both agreed she wasn't the right fit. We ended up hiring this other guy who had retail experience and actually knew about computers and phones. He's been doing great ever since. But apparently the girl we didn't hire has a mother who doesn't take no for an answer. Last Tuesday I was working the evening shift when this woman stormed into the store. She was probably in her late 40s, had that "I want to speak to your manager" haircut, and was carrying a purse. She walked straight up to the counter where I was helping a customer. The woman rudely interrupted me and demanded to speak to my manager immediately. I tried to explain that I was helping another customer and asked if she could wait a few minutes, but she refused. She said she wouldn't wait and told me to get my manager out there right away. She mentioned something about discrimination against her daughter. The customer I was helping looked uncomfortable and said he'd come back later. I felt bad but didn't want to escalate things. I went to the back office where my manager was doing paperwork. I told him there was a woman out front who seemed pretty upset about something. I mentioned that she had said something about discrimination and her daughter. My manager sighed and got up from his desk. He said he'd come see what this was about. We walked out to the front of the store where the woman was now pacing back and forth, looking at her phone. My manager greeted her politely and said he understood she wanted to speak with him. The woman immediately launched into her complaint. She told him that her daughter had applied for a job here 2 months ago and that we didn't hire her. She accused us of discrimination, claiming it was because her daughter was a woman. My manager assured her that we don't discriminate based on gender. He explained that we have several female employees and that hiring decisions are based solely on qualifications and fit for the position. The woman called him a liar. She insisted that her daughter was more qualified than anyone we could have hired. She bragged that her daughter had a high school diploma and was very pretty and personable. My manager apologized but said he couldn't discuss specific hiring decisions or other candidates. He told her that we hired the most qualified person for the position. The woman asked if he meant me, pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal. Then she made a disgusting accusation, claiming I was probably sleeping with my manager to keep my job. She demanded that he fire me right now and hire her daughter instead. I felt my face turn red. My manager's expression went from professional to seriously annoyed. He told her to stop right there. He said she was making inappropriate accusations and creating a hostile environment in his store. The woman got even more angry, asking how she was creating a hostile environment. She accused him of discriminating against qualified candidates and said her daughter deserved the job. She threatened to sue the company for everything it was worth if he didn't fire me and hire her daughter. My manager said he understood she was upset, but he wasn't going to change the hiring decision based on threats. He told her that her daughter was not the most qualified candidate and that was the end of it. The woman was furious. She asked if he knew who she was and bragged that her husband was a lawyer with connections in town. She said he would regret this decision. My manager told her he was going to have to ask her to leave the store. He explained that she was disrupting the business and making inappropriate comments. The woman refused to leave, saying she wasn't going anywhere until he gave her daughter the job. My manager said he would have to call security and have her escorted out. That's when the woman completely lost it. She started screaming that he couldn't treat her like this. She yelled that she was a paying customer and had rights. My manager told her that she wasn't a customer right now. He said she was someone who was harassing his employees and disrupting his business. He asked her to please leave. The woman screamed that she wasn't leaving until he did what was right. And then she did something I couldn't believe. She wound up and slapped my manager right across the face. Hard. The store went dead silent. My manager just stood there for a second, his cheek red from the slap. Then he looked at the woman with the coldest expression I've ever seen. He told her she had just made a very big mistake. Before the woman could react, my manager slapped her right back. Not hard enough to hurt her seriously, but definitely hard enough to get her attention. The woman shrieked that he couldn't hit her and that it was assault. My manager corrected her, saying that, actually, she had assaulted him first. He said he was defending himself. The woman said she was calling the police. My manager said that was a good idea because he was calling them to. My manager pulled out his phone and dialed 911 while the woman stood there sputtering. She seemed to realize that maybe she'd gone too far. I could hear my manager reporting an assault at his store. He told the operator that a customer had just slapped him and that he needed officers there immediately. The woman tried to backtrack, saying she didn't mean to do it. My manager gave the address to the dispatcher and said he would stay on the line. The woman tried to leave, but my manager blocked her path. He told her she wasn't going anywhere. He said she wanted to involve the police, so now they were going to wait for them. The woman accused him of kidnapping, saying he couldn't keep her there. My manager explained that he wasn't keeping her there. He said he was making a citizen's arrest for assault. About 10 minutes later, 2 police officers walked into the store. The woman immediately started talking to them. She told them that my manager had attacked her for no reason. She claimed she was just trying to get her daughter a job and he became violent. The first officer asked my manager for his side of the story. My manager explained that this woman had come into his store demanding that he fire one of his employees and hire her daughter instead. He said when he refused, she became increasingly aggressive and eventually slapped him. He told them he defended himself. The second officer asked if anyone else had witnessed this. I told them I saw the whole thing and that she had slapped him first. The officers looked at the security cameras, and after reviewing the footage, they put the woman in handcuffs. The first officer told her she was under arrest for assault. The woman said it was ridiculous and that she was going to sue all of us. The second officer read her rights and suggested she use her right to remain silent. When they led the woman out of the store, she kept screaming about how unfair everything was and how her husband was going to destroy us all. After the police left, my manager asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine and asked if he was okay. He said he was good, but admitted he probably shouldn't have slapped her back. He said he'd had enough of people thinking they could put their hands on retail workers. I told him I didn't blame him, and that the whole thing was insane. My manager said he guessed we now knew why her daughter didn't get the job. He joked that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The next day, the woman's husband called the store threatening to sue us. My manager told him to go ahead and try, since we had everything on security camera. We never heard from them again. I found out later that the woman got charged with assault and had to pay a fine. She also had to do community service at a local charity shop. My sister has this really annoying habit where she never asks for what she wants directly. Instead, she'll drop hints and expect everyone around her to read her mind and just do things for her. It's exhausting, honestly. Like, if she wants the air conditioning turned on, she won't just ask someone to turn it on. She'll start with these comments about how warm it is in the room or ask if anyone else feels hot. She'll keep repeating variations of this until someone finally gets fed up and asks if she wants the AC on. Then she'll act all innocent and say she's fine, but if someone else is hot, they should turn it on. It drives me and my brother crazy because we know exactly what she's doing, but she acts like she's being considerate by not directly asking. Meanwhile, she's making everyone uncomfortable with her constant hinting until someone gives in. This whole thing came to a head last weekend during my birthday dinner. My parents had taken us all out to this nice restaurant to celebrate, and I was really looking forward to having a good time with my family. The food was great and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves at first. But then my sister started up with her usual routine. I could tell she wanted another cocktail because she kept making these comments about how refreshing drinks look and how nice it must be to have something cold. She'd look at other people's drinks and make little sighs. She started talking about how refreshing the cocktails looked that night. My mom asked if she was enjoying her meal, and she said yes, but then went on about how amazing other people's drinks looked and how cooling they must be. She kept this up for a while, and I could see our parents getting a bit confused. My brother and I exchanged looks because we both knew what was happening. She wanted a drink but wouldn't just order one. When the waitress came by to check on us, she was really friendly and asked if we needed anything else. My dad ordered another beer, my mom asked for a wine refill, my brother wanted another soda, and I decided to try the mango cocktail. When the waitress turned to my sister, she claimed she was perfectly fine and didn't need anything. The waitress smiled and went to get our drinks. I watched my sister's face, and I could tell she was getting more and more agitated. She kept looking at the bar area and making these little comments about how some people just get to enjoy nice drinks. I ignored her because it was my birthday, and I didn't want to deal with her drama. I figured if she wanted a drink, she could order one like the rest of us did. We're all adults here. The rest of the dinner was tense. She barely participated in conversation and kept making these passive-aggressive comments about how lucky we all were to have such thoughtful family members. My parents didn't really catch on to what was happening, but my brother and I definitely did. When we got home, she completely exploded. She followed me into the living room and started yelling about how incredibly rude we had all been that night. When I asked what she was talking about, she said we had all ordered drinks and just left her sitting there with nothing, and how embarrassing that was for her. My brother pointed out that she had said she was fine when the waitress asked, and that the server had literally asked if she wanted anything. But she said that wasn't the point, and that we should have known she wanted a drink too. I asked how we were supposed to know that when she said she was fine. She explained that because everyone else got one, obviously she wanted one too, but she was waiting for her family to take care of her. She said that's what families do. She was actually angry at us for not ordering her a drink when she explicitly said she didn't want one. My brother asked if she wanted us to ignore what she said and just order for her anyway. She said yes, that we should have known that when she said no to the waitress, she was just being polite. She expected us to step up and order for her because that's what considerate family members do. I told her that made no sense and that she's an adult who can ask for what she wants. But she insisted she shouldn't have to ask, that we all saw everyone else getting drinks and should have automatically included her. She said the fact that we let her sit there thirsty while we all enjoyed ourselves was completely inconsiderate. My brother and I just stared at her. The entitlement was unreal. My brother tried to clarify by asking if she wanted us to read her mind, ignore what she actually says, and just order things for her without asking. She said that in the future, yes, when we're out as a family and everyone else is ordering drinks, we need to order one for her too. She said she doesn't care if she says no to the server because we should know better. I told her that was ridiculous and that she is 26 years old and can order her own drinks. She went on about how it's about being thoughtful and how good family members anticipate each other's needs instead of just thinking about themselves. This went on for another 20 minutes. She kept insisting that we should have taken care of her and that her saying no to the waitress was just her being polite. According to her logic, we should have overruled her and ordered for her anyway. The worst part was when she said that my birthday dinner was ruined because we didn't cater to her unspoken needs. She actually tried to make me feel guilty for not reading her mind on my own birthday. Finally, I'd had enough. I told her that from now on, I would take her at her word. If she says she doesn't want something, I'll believe her. If she wants something, she needs to ask for it directly like everyone else. She stormed off to her room, and we haven't talked much since. My brother thinks I handled it right, but now she's giving everyone the silent treatment and acting like we're terrible people. The funny thing is, this isn't even the first time something like this has happened. She does this constantly, and we always end up having to decode her hints and figure out what she really wants. I'm just tired of playing these games. I mean, what kind of person gets angry at their family for not ordering them a drink they explicitly said they didn't want? The entitlement is just mind-blowing to me. I had just started working at this mid-sized software company after moving to a new city. The job market was tough back then, and I was grateful to land a position as a junior developer. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to cover my rent and basic expenses. Money was tight, so I made it a habit to bring homemade lunches to work. I'd spend Sunday afternoons meal prepping, making big batches of pasta, stir fries, or casseroles that I could portion out for the week. The office had a decent-sized kitchen with two refrigerators that everyone shared. I'd label my containers with my name and the date just like everyone else. The first few weeks went smoothly. I was still getting to know my coworkers and settling into the routine. Then it started happening. At least twice a week, I'd go to the fridge during lunch break only to find my container there, but completely empty or with just a few sad spoonfuls left. The first time it happened, I thought maybe I'd forgotten to pack enough food or miscalculated the portions. But when it kept happening, I realized someone was stealing my lunch. The worst part wasn't even the missing food, it was the audacity. Whoever was doing this would eat my lunch but leave the empty container behind, like they were doing me a favor by not throwing it away. I'd be left standing there holding an empty plastic box, stomach growling, with no backup plan. I started asking around the office about it. My cubicle neighbor, an older woman from accounting, just shook her head sympathetically. She told me I was dealing with him, the guy from the marketing department. She described him as tall, always wearing expensive suits, and explained that he'd been doing this for years. When I asked if management ever did anything about it, she said they'd talked to him before, but nothing ever changed. He just denied it or made jokes about it. I soon figured out exactly who she was talking about. This guy was in his 40s, always bragging about his expensive car and fancy clothes. He had this condescending attitude toward everyone, but especially toward women. In meetings, he'd interrupt female colleagues, mansplain basic concepts, and make inappropriate comments about appearances. He seemed to think the office was his personal kingdom. The more I learned about him, the angrier I got. He was making probably 3 times my salary, yet he was stealing lunches from people who were barely scraping by. It wasn't about the money for him, it was about power and showing that he could take whatever he wanted without results. I complained to my supervisor, who said they'd look into it. A week later, my supervisor told me they'd spoken to him and he denied everything. They suggested I could try labeling my food more clearly or maybe keeping it in my desk instead. Basically, they wanted me to solve the problem by making it easier for him to get away with it. That's when I decided to get creative. I'm a pretty petty person when I'm pushed, and I had plenty of time to plan something special. I started bringing 2 lunches to work, one decoy lunch that went in the fridge, and a backup sandwich that I kept at my desk. The decoy lunches were getting stolen like clockwork, but at least I wasn't going hungry anymore. For 2 weeks, I let him think he was winning while I plotted my revenge. Then I started phase 2 of my plan. I began casually mentioning to coworkers that I was trying this new wellness trend I'd read about online. I'd bring it up during coffee breaks or lunch conversations. I told them I'd been researching these alternative health practices lately, and some of them were pretty intense. When coworkers asked what I meant, I explained there was this whole movement about not wasting any part of your body's natural processes. I mentioned how some people collect and consume their own menstrual blood because it's supposed to be packed with nutrients. I watched him out of the corner of my eye during these conversations. He was always eavesdropping, probably looking for more information about people's lunch habits. The next week I ramped it up. I started talking about how I was actually trying this menstrual blood consumption method myself and how I was incorporating it into my meal prep routine. I even went so far as to make a fake video on my phone showing me preparing a meal and adding what looked like blood from a menstrual cup. I told people I knew it sounded gross, but the health benefits were supposed to be amazing. I mentioned that I've been adding it to my lunch containers for the past week. I made sure to have these conversations when he was within earshot. I could see him looking uncomfortable, but I kept going. I described how the taste wasn't that bad when you mixed it with the right seasonings, and how the iron content was incredible. Now I want to be clear, I never actually did any of this. The blood in my fake video was just a mixture of corn syrup and red food coloring. I'm well aware of the health risks involved with consuming blood, and I would never actually do something that dangerous, but I was counting on him being too disgusted and worried to think rationally about it. What I might have actually done was add some less harmful but equally gross ingredients to my decoy lunches. Let's just say I got creative with some dead skin from my feet that I've been saving up. Nothing dangerous, but definitely not something you'd want to eat. The plan worked better than I could have hoped. After about a week of my menstrual blood stories, he suddenly took a week off work. When he came back, he looked pale and kept shooting nervous looks my way. More importantly, my lunch containers stopped getting emptied. I kept up the wellness talk for a few more weeks just to make sure the message really sank in. I'd casually mention how much I was enjoying my new health routine and how I plan to keep it up long term. The shared fridge became a safe space again, not just for me but for everyone. Other people started commenting on how nice it was that the lunch thief problem seemed to have mysteriously resolved itself. He never said anything directly to me about it, but I could tell he knew that I knew. There was this awkward tension whenever we passed in the hallway. He'd avoid eye contact and hurry past like he was afraid I might start talking about my latest wellness experiments. He'd open the fridge, look around nervously, then quickly grab his own clearly labeled items and leave. No more casual browsing through other people's food. No more entitled grabbing of whatever looked good. A few months later, I heard he'd been laid off during a company restructuring. I can't say I was sorry to see him go. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.